Oh. It's 2 o'clock. Okay, the time is 2 p.m., so I will call the Tuesday, October 15th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And I'll begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11. We recognize that we stand upon the land that carries the footsteps of many Indigenous peoples, including the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. And the city honors the First Peoples of this land and is committed to fostering reconciliation through relationship and building. And I do see that we have some guests in our audience, so just for housekeeping, in the event any emergency is sounded, the exit doors are there or behind us, but just follow staff and go to the muster point, which is at the south end of the parking lot. And the washrooms are located in the main lobby. So thank you. All right, so first item of business is approval of the September 17th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you. I'll make a motion that Council approves the September 17th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented and circulated.
Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing or hearing any, then I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. All right, and that is carried. So the next item is delegations. If anybody would like to speak to any of the items that are on the agenda, and I'm not seeing anybody who isn't accounted for in our audience, so I think there will be nobody racing forward. So we'll move on, and we will begin with the economic update. Clayton Northey, CIBC Wood Gundy, James Hobson, and Charette Chahal. Welcome. And I'll let you do your introductions so that we know who's who.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of the Committee of the Whole. Today I have with me James Hobson and Charette Chahal from CIBC Wood Gundy, who act as our investment advisors and are here to provide an economic update. I'll pass that on to them.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Clayton. And good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us here today. So we hope the economic update, we're going to walk you through kind of the key themes in terms of what's happening out there. The world has shifted quite materially in the last 3 months or so. So we hope that this information helps guide your decision making over the coming year when you're thinking about things from a macro perspective. So I just want to start out talking about sort of the broader picture story in terms of where we are and where we just came from. This graph here just shows you the Bank of Canada overnight rate graphed against inflation. And pretty clear story here that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Central banks kept interest rates very low for very long after the pandemic, and then entered into the fastest rate hiking cycle that we've seen on records back to the 60s. So it threw us through quite a whirlwind in terms of managing this $4 billion through this cycle. But essentially, why were they raising interest rates? Well, it was to bring inflation back down to earth. So the short story is they've accomplished that. Inflation is coming back down to earth, and so they really ran out of excuses as to why they should keep the monetary policy rate so restrictive. They had the overnight rate at 5% when all the inflation numbers were coming in sub 2%. So they really had no more excuse to keep it so high. So we have seen 3 rate cuts from the Bank of Canada. You can see there on the right. And the forecast is for them to continue doing so. There was a data release this morning that also lends to that kind of thesis. So in terms of the interest rate world, this will guide kind of the rates of return we can get on your investment portfolio, as well as the rates that you're paying on debt. Clearly, we went through a period of very elevated interest rates. To your credit and to administration's credit, you were able to deploy some long-term investments during that elevated interest rate cycle. So through some smart planning, you have locked in some higher interest rates over the next several years. so that your investment revenues don't fall materially when interest rates come down. So that's a good news story there. We do anticipate, so this graph here shows you the 2-year bond and the 30-year bond. That 30 years, the black line, we really don't see that coming down too much further. It's adjusted for kind of future rate expectations. Where you're going to see the biggest changes in that 2-year number, so short-term interest rates, municipalities holding tons of cash, that revenue is going to be cut probably in half in the next year and a half. So very important when we're kind of managing the liquidity of the city. Now, I'll switch gears into kind of just talking about how this monetary policy impacts the economy as a whole. So generally when we start looking at the economic cycle is we look at the consumer. What's the health of the average Canadian? On the left there shows you the percentage change in consumer spending since 2022. And if you just look at the aggregate demand, it looks like we're actually in good shape relative to the previous, relative to 3 other periods of financial contraction. But if we break it down in terms of per capita, that's on the right there, it looks a lot more like a recession than you would otherwise think. So all this to say that consumers are feeling the pain from these higher interest rates, which is part of the reason why, you know, we do see more interest rate cuts over the next kind of 6 months in particular. When it comes to unemployment and the interest rate cycle, the Bank of Canada looks at 2 things. They'll look at inflation. Check, that's already come down below 2%. The number this morning came out at 1.6, so they've already got that under control. But they have a dual mandate, same as the US Fed, where they want to keep employment strong. So the next place to look would be the labor market. The black line there shows you the latest unemployment rate. So the rise in unemployment rate is greater than in previous slowdowns, but it's not in recessionary levels. So the orange line and the red line, that's the sort of slowdown type periods. With the gray line at the top there, that's what happens in recession. You see that unemployment number spike quite materially. So all this to say is that we have seen a rise in unemployment, which is starting to challenge the consumer, but we're not in sort of great recession type unemployment levels. And again, this is why the Bank of Canada needs to act. They need to act fast because the unemployment is trending in the wrong direction. It's trending towards more unemployment. So again, adding to that thesis. You could blame it on an immigration story. So say that, you know, there was a lot of people that moved into Canada in the last year, particularly. But if we break it down, that unemployment rate, it's actually most impacting domestic-born Canadians and those that have been here for more than 5 years. So you can't just blame it all on bringing lots of people into Canada. It is impacting the people that have been here for a long period of time. And then just lastly here, just to wrap up the inflation conversation, the number this morning that really stuck out to me, if you strip out shelter costs, the 1-year change in terms of prices is 0.39%. So essentially no change in the past year in terms of the prices that we're paying, with the exception that those darn mortgage interest costs for all of us with mortgages, we're renewing at much higher interest rates now, which is again putting pressure on the consumer. So inflation's under control. Unemployment needs to stay in check. So again, we do anticipate a rate cut next week. The question our economics team put out this morning is that for Tiff Macklem, the BOC chair, it's not will he cut interest rates next week, it's how much will he cut. So the market has now shifted away from predicting a 1/4 point cut to now 75% priced in a jumbo cut, so a 0.5% cut next week. So that's our house view, is that that overnight rate will go from 4.25 to 3.75 as soon as next week. So things are happening; they're happening very quickly here in response to you know, this changing conditions that I've kind of walked you through. And just to wrap up on your kind of, I mentioned the mortgage renewals, the last kind of hurdle to bringing inflation back was actually caused by the Bank of Canada raising interest rates. So if you look at mortgage interest costs, which is sort of your the percentage of your income that you're paying on your mortgage, the year-over-year growth was 23% as of May. The good news for us is that because we're seeing these rate cuts and because we anticipate that to continue, there should not be more increases in terms of our cost of living, so our mortgage interest expense for homeowners, which is a good news story. And then in terms of inflation, the question kind of comes, you know, a lot of that 8% inflation was caused by supply chain bottlenecks. During COVID, there was ports shut down. We couldn't get things. It took a year to get a couch manufactured. So not the best situation if you're trying to buy furniture. But the good news now is that the Canadian economy is well stocked. Inventory levels are actually quite high. So we've moved from a just-in-time to a just-in-case inventory system. So basically, the short version of this is we can withstand sort of an increase in growth without stoking inflation. So the hope is that we get a Goldilocks situation where interest rates come back down, but growth stays on its upward trajectory. The nice thing is it's a positive story here in Alberta, and I'll turn it to Char to kind of walk you through that.
Thanks, James. So on a national average, like the story is turning positive, right? Like interest rates coming down, inflation is coming down, the growth trajectory and capacity for Canada as a whole is very positive. It isn't without its risk factors, obviously. The biggest one that I want to talk on right now is housing affordability across Canada, and more specifically the bubble micro housing economy that is Alberta. This slide kind of shows you, kind of sums up what position Canada's in right now. And I do not envy the individual who has to solve this equation, but it kind of shows you the estimated household formation. So new households looking for housing within Canada. And then on the bottom side there, you can see the trajectory of the supply that we've seen kind of enter the market. We are significantly undersupplied relative to how many people are looking for homes. And to give you context, what a 600,000 cumulative underbuild means, it's 3 years of supply under what the market is demanding right now. So as a large picture situation, this is kind of the issue that the Bank Canada, the Feds, they all have to solve. Now, it's a concern from obviously a housing demand and housing pricing perspective, but then you have a two sides of the coin situation where obviously mortgage interest costs, as James has touched on, are so expensive that resetting in the new rate environment is going to have a massive impact to the average consumer. And that's why I like to put this chart up here. I used to just have the right-hand side there, which kind of showed you the percentage increase in somebody's monthly mortgage payment at renewal if we use the July interest rate environment, which was about a 25% increase. So you can kind of see how fast the market's starting to price in these rate cuts. At the August rate cut environment, it would have been a 20% increase in your monthly mortgage payments. But the two interesting kind of bars are on the left, on the two right ones there. The jumbo cut that James is referring to, even if we get a jumbo cut, that is a almost 15% increase to the average consumer's monthly mortgage payment, which is huge when we just talked about as a, whether we have a recession or not, per capita, we're spending significantly less. It still feels like a recession, whether we technically call one or not. And then even if we do a full percentage point cut to where our forecast is right now, you're looking at a 10% monthly increase in people's mortgage payments. So no matter how aggressive we cut the interest rate environment, the pain is still going to be felt because, yes, the increase is a lot. But if we look at the left-hand side there and plot that against wage increases, so how much have people been able to pay themselves more and weather this economy, as a nominal perspective, it looks not that bad. You have about, on average, about an 18% increase to wages across the board. Adjusted for inflation, that's basically the equivalent of a 4% increase of people's wages. So at a 10% increase and a 4% actual wage increase, that's a large gap that individuals have to offset from a mortgage cost perspective. So this slide just shows us not only from an economic perspective do we have the ability to cut interest rates a lot more aggressive than everybody thinks we do. From a mortgage perspective, we might not have a choice because the Bank Canada is smarter than myself and James. They see this data. They want to essentially avoid this situation. The other side of that coin that we see, and the counterpoint that we always see is, well, if we look at the national savings rate and the amount of cash sitting on the sidelines, there's all this dry capital that's ready to be spent. Yeah, yes and no, because yes, there is a large amount of large savings rate that's happened. Yes, there may be dry powder sitting on the side, but if we look at and we decompose that number of who actually has that savings, in a nutshell, the right side just shows you that the people with the cash are the ones that have no debt. So the people that can weather the storm are the ones that don't even have debt in the first place. So as a national perspective, we don't have enough homes. We have mortgage increases coming quite significantly, and the people that have the ability to weather it are not even the ones that have the debt in the first place. And then lastly, obviously, there's been some population controls into the non-permanent resident trends and the immigration controls that we've seen come back in Canada quite materially. So Population growth is going to slow. How much is uncertain. It's going to help offset some of that demand. Is it going to fully offset? Absolutely not. You're still talking about 3 years of supply that we have to make up for in some capacity. And as administration knows very well, is you can't just plunk out, you can't just build 100,000 homes tomorrow. The construction lag timeline from when you start a home to complete that home has gone larger and larger and larger. And the qualified labor has actually come down quite materially as a national average. So less people to build the homes, and it takes a lot longer to complete that home start to finish in the environment we're sitting in. So that's kind of from the housing perspective that we're sitting in. I want to touch base on a little bit on labor, and I'm going to decompose this back down to Alberta and the impact for us here in Alberta as well, and specifically for the city as well. The Canadian unemployment rate right now is rising more than other regions. We've been underperforming all of our peers, quote unquote. This is no surprise. Canada is significantly more sensitive to interest rates than our peers. You can't buy 30-year fixed rate mortgages in Canada. You can in the States. So we're a lot more sensitive to rate environments, which means that in Canada, post-pandemic, our national unemployment rate is rising materially worse than others. However, specifically for Alberta, and this is where I start to dissect the first layer, in Alberta, an interesting kind of environment is shaking out from a labor perspective. We have a significant amount of labor capacity and qualified labor capacity sitting in Alberta. So as this interest rate environment starts to come down, the Bank of Canada starts to cut the environment back to more of a stimulative growth trajectory. Alberta now, not just because of the boom bust of oil commodities that we are used to in this province, but because of a qualified labor capacity, we have a significant amount of room to grow and to beat our peers, not just commodity driven. So the labor capacity that we have in Alberta is actually quite a positive news story. You can kind of see what that looks like from a GDP growth perspective. We're going to essentially lead the pack in 2025 with the national average at 1.8%, Alberta about 2.5%, and then again 3.1% next in 2026 versus 2.7%. And then on the right-hand side, you can see where Alberta's inflation target is relative to the national average. We'll call it just around 2% in 2025 and 2026, around 3%, so just a little bit hotter than the national average. So we're well positioned to beat all of our other peers. And finally, for something other than just oil prices being really high, which in Alberta we haven't been able to say for quite some time. And the other one that I want to touch on from this slide perspective, specifically for the city of Fort Saskatchewan, not only do we have qualified construction labor, yes, commodities, there's a lot of geopolitical risk and things like that coming into the market right now, but specifically for the city of Fort Saskatchewan, you guys have a very enviable area next to you guys, the heartland growth that we've seen from the oil markets and the commodity perspective. We've seen quite a lot of capital expenditures where we've seen companies put their dollars behind is in that area and in diversified economies like Inter Pipeline's petrochemical facility. You have the Dow facility coming in as well. So you have qualified construction labor in quote unquote diversified economies, not just heavily oil driven, and in areas where dollars are being targeted. So Heartland, City Fort Saskatchewan is very well positioned relative, like Alberta's well positioned, and then within that, there's kind of a magnifying glass on this local area because it's well positioned no matter what rate environment we get and no matter what growth trajectory we get, given where we've seen those capital expenditure programs. So in a variable, enviable position. The housing environment in Alberta, this again, no surprise to anybody. We've seen national averages for housing go quite crazy. Housing stock per capita now the lowest in the country in Alberta. You have a lot of immigration that comes into Canada. Then you have a lot of migration that comes to Alberta. Our supply for housing, obviously people coming here, you can unlock significant amount of equity of your condo in Vancouver or Toronto, move to Alberta, get a home. The story of Alberta, all the positive that all of us have known for the better part of our lives, where we're going, it's great to live in Alberta. The secret's essentially out and they're all coming here, which is great for the local economy where they're continuing to work, but remains, and the impact of that remains a concern because it's remote jobs. We don't know where that job, where their net benefit is kind of going to, but overall from Alberta, it's good if you already own a home, not the best if you're new entrants into the market because the housing affordability here is starting to go higher. Relative to our peers, we look pretty cheap, but still for individuals within Alberta, that housing stock addition for us from a supply perspective, we're the lowest per capita in the country. So a lot more people moving to Alberta. That trend will not go away anytime soon. That slide that James kind of showed you on the spending chart from the national average, we can dissect that and look at Alberta. Alberta's been hit the hardest by the higher rates. We have had the largest contraction on retail sales per capita. But what that also tells us is when you get hit the hardest and there's a lot more stimulus in terms of lower rate environments being pushed into the economy, the capacity for that region becomes that much larger. So qualified labor, and from here, from the retail sales perspective, it gives us a significant amount of room in our economy in Alberta to grow. So that lower rate environment, again, just all this is kind of pointing to that story that we're really well positioned here to kind of to weather that storm and get back to that recovery. That's from the individual perspective. If we look at it from a fiscal perspective and how our province is done, it looks a little bit technical here, but basically you're just plotting the pre-pandemic to post-pandemic where we're sitting right now, public finances on a budget balance perspective and how much output they've been getting for their budget balance. So from a GDP and net debt perspective, across the board, you can kind of see the net output has kind of dropped for everybody but Alberta. So our finances and our public finances have now completely positioned themselves to mirror what the forecast is saying for Alberta. So from every kind of supply chain of the economy that is Alberta, we're really well positioned. And then again, magnifying glass onto the city of Fort Saskatchewan, even better and more enviable position for your guys' growth trajectory kind of moving forward. The interest rate forecast, this is the fun one for myself and James, and you can obviously tell we're bond nerds when I say an interest rate forecast is fun for us. But the top line there, the Bank Canada overnight target rate, that's the one we hear about on the news where we go, Bank Canada is anticipating a rate cut environment. We're sitting at about 4.25 right now. This jumbo rate cut environment that we're talking about a 50 basis point cut that we anticipate coming down the pipe, that's not the crazy one for us. If you fast forward to basically June of next year, when they start cutting interest rates, they're going to be fast, going down to 2.25. The reason that we're comfortable showing you 2.25 is because within Canada as a whole, 2.75% is the minimum interest rate cut needed to avoid a recession, let alone get back to growth. So we need to cut below 2.75% to that 2.25 percentage point to get back to a growth trajectory. So that's why we're comfortable showing you this very aggressive interest rate forecast relative to what the market's pricing. But again, administration has been phenomenal to work with, where we've been able to get ahead of this interest rate cut environment and lock in higher interest rates on your investments for a lot longer to offset the impact of this piece. Personally, from this perspective, this is where you will see an impact on your savings rates. You'll see a little bit of an impact on the mortgage rates as well. With that, in kind of summarizing what we're just kind of chatting about here, as a whole, Canada has the ability to cut interest rates a lot more than the market's anticipating to get us back to that growth trajectory. We have a lot more upside, specifically in Alberta and coming back down to City of Fort Saskatchewan. Inflation, we have this kind of generic point on pressure up there. It's inflation is coming back down to earth. We just like to remind everybody that going from 8% to 2% sounds like a good story, but the bill's already been incurred. You're just growing. Money's going, the rate of change is just going slower. So you're getting 2% growth on 8%. So it's not like 2% means we don't have to offset it. That bill's been incurred. We have to offset it somewhere. There's room for growth before inflation becomes a concern again. The world shifted from just-in-time inventory to just-in-case inventory post-COVID, where we oversupplied everything to offset and have significant more capacity to offset demand. From the interest rate cut environment in Canada, there's a need to accelerate growth. So cutting below that 2.75% number is very important to get to that growth trajectory. 2.75 is what we call the neutral rate. That's the rate at which the economy will neither be detracting or stimulative. So we need to get well below that number to get into a growth trajectory. Rates will stay low through 2026 due to the mortgage renewal considerations. All those mortgages from 2019, 2020, and 2020, those resets will happen by the end of kind of 2026. So we anticipate low rate environment well into the 2026 year to offset the impact of, well, it's already going to be a material impact from where we had mortgages. Myself and James are not looking forward to our mortgage renewals next year, but it is what it is. And then Alberta, we're going to lead the pack due to a diversity of factors, not just commodities, labor capacity being one of them, capital expenditures and what we call diversified oil and gas supply chains via petrochemicals and things like that, position the city of Fort Saskatchewan very well. And with that, in a typical James and myself context, short amount of time, a lot amount of data, but we want to make sure we gave you guys time for questions.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. We will open it up for some questions. Councillor Abatoye first.
Thank you for your presentation. My My first question is about the short-term investments remark you had made earlier. You said that our revenues in the next couple years could be cut in half. What does that mean, and how do we mitigate that risk?
Sorry, great question. The shorter answer is you've already mitigated that. That's more of a, if some municipalities weren't looking at that because they're like, the essential is we're holding cash, but we're being paid so much to hold this cash. So why should we be concerned? However, administration was phenomenal. When you guys RFP'd your investments, you were well ahead of that schedule. So we were able to kind of offset that impact already. So that's already been taken account for.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. Thank you. My second question is talking about, I mean, you've spoken a lot about just different things, housing, interest rate growth. So are there, in the short term, are there economic indicators that we should be monitoring just to ensure that we are rightly positioned for all these economic upturns and downturns and everything that's happening and that will be happening in the next few years?
It's a great question, Councillor. The reality is, as a national average, it's very easy for me to point to some indicators like labor is the big concern for the economy right now, because that's the one everybody's watching to see if there's a recession. What I can say is overall, whether we get an actual recession or not, the pain's already been felt. But specifically for the city of Fort Saskatchewan, it's weird for me to be like, yes, the pain has been felt, but given what's happening in Alberta and the focus of the economic growth that's happening in Alberta, there's certain areas where companies have kind of put their capital behind, and this area is one of them. So I'm less concerned with giving you an indicator. It's more so national indicators that would be less of an impact for you guys.
Okay, so basically we're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Excuse me. To follow up on Councillor Abatoye's question, given what seems to be, and I stress seems to be, an obvious trend for interest rates in the next couple of years, have you counseled or has the City of Fort Saskatchewan changed its portfolio to recognize those trends?
Yes, Councillor. Yes, Councillor, great point. So the city went through the RFP process for the long-term investment portfolio, which was awarded to our team at Wood Gundy. So we were able to carve out as much as possible to lock in at these higher interest rates, say north of 5%. Any sort of operating cash that's being used for sort of payroll and short-term liquidity needs, that's where you're going to see the revenue fall. Unfortunately, there's not really much you can do about that, because those cash rates will follow that interest rate coming down.
If you could, approximately what percentage of our total portfolio is short-term versus longer-term?
That would be a question for Clayton.
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, I would say it's approximately 50-50 at the end of August. I think it's slightly higher than that towards cash, because that's our operating capital until next May, June. But those funds, again, we do have some that we're rolling over, interest rates that were at a very, very low level. We're in 2020 investments are rolling over next year and late this year that will be invested at higher rates, so we'll be able to offset some of that impact next year in next year's budget with those rollover of very, very low rate longer term interests.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure you look at that in conjunction with our 10-year capital plan and cash needs. But you're comfortable that you've maximized our opportunity, and I guess that's sort of a rhetorical question, but I'm looking for an affirmation.
Through worship to Councillor Kelly, yes, I think we're comfortable with that. We've done the best that we can, given the current rate environment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question, but it's more related to the housing part of it. So when you talk about people renewing their mortgages, but people buying at this point in time, so if they were going into you to ask for your advice, would your advice be to them maybe take a floating rate as opposed to a fixed rate?
We get that question almost every time we do an econ update. I can tell you what I did personally on my mortgage renewal is I just renewed it for a short-term fix, so like a 2-year fixed, knowing that in 2 years the rates will probably be lower and I can reset it. if you're comfortable wearing the risk of your payment changing month to month, and that's a big if, some people are comfortable with it, it makes sense based on this forecast to go variable. But you have to be able to stomach it if by chance rates go the other way, your payment's going to go the other way as well.
Okay. So it's still a gamble. What you provide is still a guess.
It's a question of, is the individual like just a fixed budget, knowing what they're going to pay, and that's just what they can budget for, or does the individual have a, I want to say, more risky, aggressive profile where they're comfortable taking a forecast on what interest rates are going? Because everything's pointing to interest rates coming down, so absolutely sure. But is that impact of keeping a higher rate for the next year going to impact the individual, or is just locking in and setting it for getting it the best? So forecast says wait, but has it impacted the individual's budget?
Just to add to that, we do think there's a lot of potential buyers sitting on the sidelines waiting for these rate cuts. It's become a bit more public knowledge that the Bank of Canada's cut. Usually the public kind of wakes up to it once they see a couple of rate cuts. So I think, in the spring might be a great time to sell because you're going to see a whole bunch of buyers flood into the market.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, round two.
Thank you. This might not be a fair question, so don't feel like you have to answer it. But I have had a question in my mind now for a long time, and part of your analysis looked at housing prices. I think you focused primarily on Alberta, but when I hear the phrase national home prices, I know that Alberta is significantly lower than the 70% of the population that lives in the Golden Triangle in Ontario and southern Quebec, and significantly lower than the millions of people that live in the lower mainland area of BC. So exactly, and if you can, do you really think house prices are inflated or out of proportion in Alberta? And that might not be a fair question.
Councillor, great question. We think about it all the time. I think real estate in Alberta is probably undervalued. You've got just anecdotally, we've got tons of professionals that are relocating from Toronto, like you said, Golden Triangle there, and then BC. You can unlock, my parents just said it, you can unlock half your home equity, buy a nice house in Alberta. The problem is that a lot of that boat's already kind of passed, right? A lot of it's already been reflected. So yeah, so Calgary is setting records for detached, single family, all the different categories. Alberta's setting record prices for, whereas you're seeing a bit of softening in Toronto, a bit of softening in Vancouver. So it's kind of an interesting story.
And just to add to what James is saying, absolutely. Do I feel Alberta is undervalued? Yes, but does that mean that the other areas are not overvalued? I believe it's kind of the same, right? You're gonna have somewhat of a correction where they have been way too unaffordable for quite some time, and we've been affordable. We're just not used to seeing the prices that our peers will pay for houses.
There's an adjustment necessary, but thank you. I would agree with your comments. And if I may, Mayor Katcher, just one more question.
Go ahead.
You had a chart comparing Canadian interest rates, your projections versus United States interest rates. And again, maybe not a fair question, but I'd certainly welcome your comments. How is it that interest rates in Canada can be projected to be significantly lower than the United States for the next decade? I mean, help me understand that, please.
It's a great point, Councillor. And our economics team did a whole study and report on that exact topic. Because the argument is, if we cut way more than the US, if I'm getting paid 5% in the US and 2% in Canada, I'm putting my money in the US, which is going to, pull our currency down, which is the biggest risk, right? If we cut to zero and the US is at 3.375, our currency is going to get beat up, which can actually cause inflation. The number that the economics kind of research paper landed on was that we can deviate up to 1 percentage point roughly without creating more inflation. So right here we've got essentially we're deviating as much as we can without causing inflation. So you've got the U.S. Fed at 3.30, us at 2.25, so about 100 basis points different. That's about the maximum divergence that the Bank of Canada is going to be comfortable with. But the story's the same, not just in Canada, but also the U.S., right? They are going to keep they're going to draw their interest rates down, but their economy is stronger than ours, and it's less interest rate sensitive. So while Chart and I have to go and reset our mortgages at much higher, 20% higher payments. In the U.S., they've locked into 30-year mortgages, so they just go, it doesn't impact me, right? But very good question, and it's like openly debated as we speak. So.
And I don't know, is there anybody else on the list here? I'll keep talking then if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And again, maybe not a fair question, but I welcome your comments. How is it, or why is it that the United States allows 30-year mortgages, and I know they're simply not available in Canada? And what are the impacts of that in a Reader's Digest form, if you could, please?
Yeah. The analogy that jumps to my head is, the riskiest thing a Canadian banker would do is like a regular thing that a U.S. banker would do. They're much more aggressive with their lending, with their ratios, and the market's just bigger and more liquid. So there's more, if you think about it as almost like an option market, there's more demand on either side. So Canadian option market, very thin, very wide bid ask. In the U.S., very liquid market, lots of participants. So you're going to find parties that are willing to give you a 30-year mortgage, whereas in Canada you probably won't. That's an option, right? To fix that. It's all it is, an interest rate option to fix it for 30 years. In Canada, no one's going to give you that option, but in the U.S., there are parties that will.
And just to add to what James saying, when you're saying what's the impact of why we wouldn't kind of trend that way, obviously our regulatory environment is significantly more restrictive than what's happening in the States, but it's also why, from an impact perspective, 2008 was an easier recovery for Canada. When you saw U.S. banks like Silicon Valley Bank kind of go under, and that was a larger contagion issue for the U.S., that wasn't a concern for Canada as well. So yes, you may give up some upside in environments like this, but on the downside, you protect your economy a lot, and it makes it more resilient against these boom bust shocks that we get as well. So it's a give and take on both sides.
Good points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that looks like all the questions. So thank you very much for being here today and providing this update. Great, thank you. And although I know you'd love to stay, you are welcome to leave. Okay, the next item that we have is the item 5, RCMP multi-year financial plan. Corrine Rayner and Inspector LaRocque.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corrine Rayner. I am the Director of Protective Services for the City, and with me is Inspector Barry LaRocque, our Detachment Commander. We are here to present to you the RCMP Multi-Year Financial Plan. This plan is a 5-year financial forecast to help guide the planning process for our Municipal Police Service Agreement. It is done and created in consultation between the RCMP and City Administration. We are seeing a $716,000 increase to the RCMP contract for 2025. I will go into more details of this increase and the budgeting strategy later in the presentation. The multi-year financial plan is an important document that builds the RCMP budget and is signed by the mayor as an agreement in principle. It is just a forecast, and we update that forecast regularly throughout the year. The plan details all of the staffing, resources, pay and benefits of the RCMP, operation and maintenance costs, capital, and other indirect costs associated to the management of the RCMP. All of these costs combined make up the RCMP yearly forecast and give us a per member cost that helps guide us in our budgeting. Fort Saskatchewan, being a municipality of over 15,000, pays 90% of the costs for the RCMP, with the 10% being cost shared with the federal government. I'll now turn it over to Inspector LaRocque for the details of his multi-year financial plan.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. As you see up on the screen right now, that is our establishment. One of the things that has not been added onto that is the new position that will be coming in the winter of 2025. So you see on the left-hand side, we have all the uniform positions, their general duty. On the right-hand side, we have our plainclothes and specialty units. So we have an establishment right now of 33 positions, and come 2025, we will have an establishment of 34 positions municipally. One of the things that has hit us and hit us hard recently is our vacancy rate. As you can see on the numbers there, our working FTE for 2024, 2025 year to date has been set at 34, and you can see that we have 22.73 positions, leaving 7.13 positions of what we call special leave. I might add that anything over 30 days is not paid for directly by the municipality. And so that 22.73 is a fluctuating number. One of the things with the RCMP establishment is it's very cyclic. So we had people leave this year, but right now we currently are having lots of people coming in. So our hard vacancies are diminishing, and our soft vacancies have diminished. So our staffing numbers are getting up to where they should be again. The 7.13 made up of Matt and Pat. Medical is our biggest number, and then the GRW is the people that are coming back on graduated return to work. And I reiterate that anything over 30 days are not paid directly by the municipality. So as I stated, we came before council earlier this year and asked for one more full-time employee, a regular member RCMP, and then we have an agreement in principle to increase that number to 35 in 2027. One of the issues or where we come together in terms of the determining why we need a greater number of members is the 5 items below that. So the what you'll hear is the COP to POP ratio. So that's the population police to population ratio, file count volume, criminal code per member, file count, crime severity index, and the needs of the community. We get asked often, is the community sufficiently staffed? And I would suggest that yes, we are, but there are, as the Wood-Gundy people said before us so eloquently, times are changing. We are sitting pretty in terms of the community, and we anticipate a significant population growth over the next number of years. With regards to the population to or police to population ratio, I do have access to different numbers, and we are in the ballpark. We are not overly with some of the other municipalities that are around the city here, around Edmonton. I can say that our criminal code per file member count is higher than a lot of the communities around Edmonton, short of Parkland over on the west side. They're significantly higher than us. So what the RCMP do, and I go back to, we're kind of like an all-inclusive resort versus an a la carte, right? So when we, our operational strategy branch will make a determination of what the what the cost is per member for the year. So the 2025-2026 number that we're having is 229,000. And that includes regular member salaries and benefits, the operation and costs, capital equipment in terms of our fleet, and the indirect and div admin costs. And those div admin costs is a portion of that 229 to 240,000, depending upon the numbers, where it is paid to the RCMP for essentially the organization to run the support side from us. So there have had the development of what we call our real-time operation center, which basically helps in things such as high-speed pursuits and things of that sort, taking over the supervision of that. So as much as we don't necessarily see more boots on the ground in different jurisdictions, there's a whole kind of behind-the-scenes development of a greater and more innovative policing net, I guess. The equipment costs and technology upgrades. This is one of the things that the RCMP have lagged behind. And as being around for 32 years, I can say that we lagged behind a long way. So we're playing catch up right now. The pistols that we carry, this thing is probably about 29 years old and is due for modernization. The big one that I think you'll see here coming, and we are on the list as of January 2025, is to get the body-worn cameras. So there is a cost to that. I've always said it's going to make a good member better, and it'll make our average members better as well. I think you're going to see a reduction in our public complaints, because when someone says that they were not nice to me or they were doing something, we can go back, review the tape, or again, look at age, the recording, and we can demonstrate to them, okay, nothing was said. They didn't tell me that I should go and X, Y, and Z. So I think that's going to be a welcome development. And as a senior member and as an officer, I'm looking forward to seeing that implemented. And the other part of the technology is, again, the technology and telecommunications. Our radio system is continuing to be upgraded, and it is about time that it happens.
So this slide shows you the staffing level history that we have experienced at the RCMP detachment, and it helps to explain to you the budgeting strategy that the city employs to be as close to our actuals as we can when we budget for the RCMP contract. There are three aspects that you're seeing on the screen here. The blue line is our established positions. The orange line is the budgeted FTE. And the gray line is the actual realized FTE utilization that we are realizing. So you can see there, just going back a year, in the 23-24 fiscal year, we had 33 established positions. The city budgeted at 29, and we came in at, the RCMP had 26.56 working FTEs. So we did have a higher vacancy rate last year over the previous year. We budget at around that 29 FTEs. We take our established positions and we minus the vacancy rate. That vacancy rate is set in consultation between Inspector LaRocque and myself and city administration, just to help us to budget according to what our actuals are. And we are continuing to budget at that level of 29 working officers. Even though we have added another position come for 2025, we're going to budget at that level just due to those vacancy rates. When we set that vacancy rate, we look at our past history and what's on the horizon for transfers and relocations, as well as any people that we have off duty. So for this coming year, in the 25-26 fiscal year, we will have 34 established positions, and like I've mentioned, we are budgeting around 29 again. The RCMP financial plan is based on a fiscal year from April 1st to March the 31st. And what we do is a calculation that accounts for our calendar year. So this will include 1 quarter of the 23-24 fiscal year rate that we pay and 3/4 of the future forecasts for 24-25. So those are our quarterly billings that you're seeing there at 1.6, and then it moves up to 1.7. Giving us a budgeted forecast of $6.9 million. We currently have 6.2 budgeted for the RCMP contract, so that leaves us with a shortfall of $716,000 that will get incorporated into our protective services budget in 2025. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Harris, you're first.
I just need a clarification. So when you talk about new technology, new guns, bringing those up, I would imagine a 29-year-old gun can shoot as well as a current Glock, but notwithstanding that, are these extra costs, like the body-worn cameras and the new guns and the new technology and the radio system, are those above and beyond, or why are they not just factored into a per member cost? Say you have to have a gun, you got to have a car, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have a camera. Why isn't that just rolled into that cost, or am I misunderstanding that?
So they all are rolled in. So it goes back to my a la carte versus my all inclusive, and so those costs are all rolled in to that $229,000. So there's no going to be an extra bill come to the city for the replacement of 33 handguns. That's all been rolled in already.
Yeah, that's just the basic cost of policing.
Yep.
And it's the tools of the trade that you need to do the job right.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I misunderstood that then. So thanks for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. Your vacancy rate right now is pretty high, and I imagine that puts a lot of pressure on the detachment. I'm just wondering if there is like return to work plans or anything in place that gives us an idea of when that might return to a more normal level for you guys.
So, yeah, the summer was difficult. So we had a bunch of contingencies in place. We had our general duty, or sorry, our GIS, our general investigation section, actually put their uniforms on and fill shifts. So we do that. And to the point of I was even putting, well, I have my uniform all the time, but I was even taking shifts as well. So yes, our people that are on GRW, we have currently 3, and there are loose plans in place to get those back. I can say that 2 of our members who were off duty sick, one with some significant heart issues, the other with significant back issues, they worked and had a plan to get back to work, and currently they are both back to work full time. So that's a good thing there. And then also we have people off on paternity leave, maternity leave, and obviously those are natural things out of my control that I can do. But yes, we're trying to work with our health services and our disability managers to really drill down, I should say, on making a plan. You need to have a plan to get back to work. And we're making a bit of headway doing that. The other thing is filling those hard vacancies. So we have one young member came in starting last week. We should have another one in the first 2 weeks of November, and we should have another 3 in before the end of the calendar year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and good to see both of you. To follow up on Councillor Macon's questions, the chart you had up in our materials, it's Appendix B, but it's the, that's it, I think. Yes. I had questions on that, and maybe you've answered one of them, perhaps. The 24-25 budget at 29.85, that's what we budgeted for? Not what we thought we were, like, in my mind, we budgeted for 33, and maybe I've missed that for 6 years. I think we've approved for 35 or 33. I think we're budgeting for 33.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelly, that used to be years ago the way that we budgeted. We went to the working FTE, so we're currently budgeting for 29 FTEs for the 25 fiscal year.
So how much would we need to increase our budget? 4 times 250,000, roughly about $1 million to get our budget to reflect what council has approved. Is that an accurate number?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelly, so at $229,000, if we went to the full budget of 34 established positions, then we would be over the 7 million. So you're correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when I look at the vacancy chart, and I know now I know that you're looking at it differently, but when I look at it, I compare the 33 that council thinks we've hired to the 22.73 that we had on the ground on average, if I read that table correctly. So I look at that as a 30% vacancy rate, Inspector, and I find that very high. I really do. And that's not your fault. I'm getting this on the table, and I don't know where and how the RCMP tackles it. Do you have any comments on what head office might be doing in that regard?
So yes, it is high. And like I said earlier, the summer was a very difficult time for the detachment to continue to have the service delivery that the community expects and deserves. One of the ways the RCMP have succeeded is they've succeeded on the backs of our employees. Our people really did more throughout the year. From the RCMP point of view, we are really taking a strong initiative to try and recruit more people. So I was on a call this morning with the management of the entire division, and we're only getting currently right now out of our troops about 4 to 5 members that are coming back to Alberta. The rest are being distributed across Canada. And again, we're getting to be an older organization as well. So we're having our attrition is kind of outweighing our incoming people. So yes, this is a huge concern of the RCMP. They're looking at different deployment models. One of the things that is they're looking at creating a relief unit. That a relief unit would go into a community. And when I was up in the Northwest Territories, what they would do up there is when someone came out on their leave, they would send someone in there for a month, basically, to do that. So we're looking at different deployment strategies to try and compensate for that. Now, Fort Saskatchewan in and of itself may not benefit necessarily from that, but I will commit to you that I will ring the bell to tell them that those resources, if needed out here, need to be deployed as well, not necessarily into the smaller communities across the rest of the province.
And I understand that last comment. I think that's an issue for Fort Saskatchewan, but thank you for your comments. I appreciate them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Always good information to see, especially ahead of budget. 2 areas that piqued my interest in the report were the increase in the cadet recruitment allowance, which is quite significant, like from around 500 to 1,200, and then it looks like a much higher starting pay to attract new employees, which I think is what it looks like the RCMP needs to fill these gaps that we have across the board. So can you just explain or maybe give a bit more detail about that? Because that's something that it looks to me like is going to increase just the cost of operations with new recruits and then working them into staffing. So is that I guess it'll be a shared cost across for training, and then like how soon are we going to see significant budget impacts per new member because of that?
So all those costs are built into that full-time or FTE cost. Okay. So that 200. So that's all built into that already. So in Depot, which is the birthplace of Mounties, they were not getting paid very much. And so again, one of the things that we were seeing is that we weren't getting people wanting to come because it's not all high school kids or 18-year-olds, right, that are coming and joining us. We're getting people who have lives. So they might have families and what have you. So we were finding that we had people not coming to Depot because they were only gave $500. So that's where the cadet allowance has been upped to try and draw more people into us. And so that's the first part. And again, sorry, Councillor, the second part.
I think it was just the starting pay because it said there was a new benchmark of 90% of step 1, but I don't know how large of an increase that is to what's currently in place. And but I think what you're saying is that this has already been factored into the cost of each FTE then.
It has been factored into the cost now, and it will continue to rise. So the RCMP it was about 5 to 6 years never got any pay raises. And so then about 3.5 years ago, there was a significant pay raise of 21, 22% to get us back up to levels of other municipal police forces. And so then just this past year, then there was another negotiated pay raise of about 8%, and they're going back to the well again April 1st of 2025. So we're trying to play catch up with the other police forces across Canada. At one time, there used to be a handshake agreement that we would stay in the top 3 of the entire police universe in Canada. And I think at one time we fell to about 97th. So there had to be the catch up. And unfortunately for municipalities, that catch up is what you have experienced. And I think that's going to lessen, right, where you'll see those pay increases become a little more normalized to what other industries are seeing in terms of pay raises.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. And again, this is nothing on all your information because it's good, but I've always struggled with that. We have 33 or 34 officers, but we're budgeting for this. It seems kind of weird. So if you're in a school and the teacher is sick, you have to replace them because you can't leave them. So what happens when someone is sick on shift? Do you fill it when they're on mat leave, or do you just say, well, you know, it just means we do a little less policing because we can leave it? Either one of you.
So again, from my phone call this morning, we don't have enough police officers to start filling all the soft vacancies, right? So what we do is we're offering up overtime, and I committed to council at the beginning of the year that I would let you know what's being paid for overtime in terms of covering shifts for when we're short or when people are calling in sick. And I ran the numbers this morning. And basically, so far on our municipal budget, we spent $122,000. So that's just about 6 months. And that 36% of that is for covering shifts. So it was let me find my number here, about $44,000 were to do that. And then you'll see those other things that we're doing. When we're short in terms of the general duty positions, we're pulling people out of our GIS unit, our community policing unit, and they're coming in and helping us fill things. In addition to myself and the staff sergeant will go and do things or work as well.
Do what needs to be done.
Yeah, to the best of what we can do, and then we call in the real people to know what they help us with some of the finer points.
So has that changed? Because wasn't it a few years ago? I thought we talked about it before that you actually had a bit of a pool that you could call in.
Yeah, we were surplus to establishment at one time, but we're kind of running thinner now. So like we just don't have that luxury. So I can commit to you that we are seeing a police delivery or policing delivery that has maybe lost some of the proactive work to it a bit, but the reactive work is still done quite well. And I think that the expectations of the community is that we're there and we're rolling around all the time, and we are significantly still, but there are times when we just don't have enough people to do some of the work, but it's then we find other ways around it.
So if we want more people, even if we put it in budget, are the people available? Because you're actually saying that there's not enough being trained. So if we added another position so that we bring it up so we have 30, hopefully, even though we budget, we say we have 35, we don't have that many. But do we even have them to be able to hire them?
So, and we've talked about this, Karine and I have talked about, do you want a budget and have a deficit at the end, or do you want a budget and have a surplus at the end? And that's where we went down to the 29, that we believe that we can get to that number in the current climate that we're at. You're right. Adding another body right now, it's great on paper, but I'll be hard pressed to find you 2 legs and 2 arms and a heartbeat to go out and do the work that's required. So I think at the 29, and things happen. Like it really truly is. We had a very serious call here a couple weeks ago, and we had 2 people go down on it, not physically, but because of the impacts of it. And those sometimes are things you just cannot anticipate.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I'm next on the speaking order. So similar question to that. So when we did our budgeting, was it last year or when you came to us this year, sometime when it was, and they said, well, we would like pre-approval for 2025 and then pre-approval for 2029. So for 2025, if you're only budgeting for 29, which is the same amount, did you not, is the budget increasing that much for that person? So why would we not then put it to 30 that you're budgeting for?
Your worship, we're budgeting based on 29 is basically taking that established positions. So we've added that established position that we got for 25 to 34. So the 34 positions less that vacancy rate, and we're just budgeting around 29. If there are more than 29 officers available to come to work, then we could experience a deficit come the end of next year. We'll have that variance within our budget. That's the strategy that we're using. So it's not that we wouldn't take the 30 officers if they were all back working. We would then pay for those members that are here. Am I answering your question? So we're going to be getting that new position in 2025. Inspector Larocque is filling that position. He will get a body. The RCMP are obligated to get that filled within 1 year. That's why we put that request in back in March.
But my
We're
question,
budgeting around the 29 mark just to base it on our actuals.
but if you budgeted for 29 last year and 29 this year, that should be a 0% increase for that person. That's where I'm struggling with, because if you're actually asking for a body, we should be putting that money in there. So
it's just the strategy that we've used because of the vacancy rate. So I know it's it's like having STE positions. We used to have 2 surplus to established positions that we never budgeted for. So now the budgeting strategy is, yes, we have 34 positions. If Inspector Larocque can get those bodies in there, then we would be paying for 34 positions. We are just mitigating that difference and a variance in our budget by trying to budget close to where the actual FTEs are.
okay. Sounds a little confusing to me, because it just feels like, if that was the case, then we could have asked for 2 or 3. And if we were actually increasing the budget by at least 1, then it would make sense, because it just feels like we're just, still keeping the budget the same. So anyway, I understand what you're doing. I just find it's a little bit confusing. And the surplus to establishment, do we still have any of those? Or I'm seeing your lip go down.
So we have 2 people surplus to staff. So we have 2 people double bunked. And one of those people will be medically discharged here soon. And then the second one is on a path to probably be discharged as well. And at that point, we will be double bunked and no positions. And we will then have only one person per position. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not impacting that 29 that we're doing.
Okay, and last question. Are the other municipalities having the same issues with the vacancies? Because I know we addressed this a number of years ago, and K Division had said, yeah, they'll work with all of us in the metro region.
Yes, everyone's got those vacancies. And I can again say that this morning in the meeting, they talked about overall, we've had 8.19% hard vacancies for the division, so for the province of Alberta. And that's up about 2% over the last 3 years. And that just basically comes down to not a lot of people want to be police officers anymore. And then in terms of our soft vacancy rate, it's about 7.5%. So in the province, we have 279 people that are off work for a myriad of different reasons over 30 days. So again, any of those people are not being paid directly by the municipality or the contract that they're under.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye, second. Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentations. I I chose to keep quiet and listen to all the conversations first and kind of hope that my question would be answered. But I'm still struggling with the $716,000 budget adjustment that you're asking for. So coming back again to the FTE, that's now been increased. Why are we asking for a $716,000 budget increase?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Abatoye. So the $716,000 is made up of an 8% increase in pay and benefits for the RCMP members. There's increased costs for operations and maintenance, as well as capital equipment. So what the RCMP gives us is a forecast of what our FTE will be at, as well as those increased costs. And they have forecasted that the 2025 calendar cost will be $6.9 million is the forecast that they are giving us. That's $229,000 per officer working, and we've budgeted for 29 officers.
Okay, so when I do the math for that, it comes to $337,000. If you're looking at an increase per officer of
this kind of will explain it a little bit different for you, because we have a fiscal year and a calendar year. So we are also incorporating costs for the 25-26 calendar year into our 2025 budget. And that cost per member is $242,000 per officer. So each year that per member rate increases. We typically will have inflation and increased costs. And so that's why we get a kind of a bit of a wonky number there for you. So this one will show you that right now, that second column from the right is our Q1 forecast. Those are all of the costs we've taken off our 90% rate, and that's where we get that per member rate of $229,000. When you look at this is where it shows you that each quarter we're paying a rate of last year's rate on the Q4 billing for the 2025 calendar year. And then our costs will increase based on that 25-26 fiscal year. So sometimes it can be confusing with, we base our budget on a calendar year and the RCMP operate on that fiscal year.
So talking about the year, can you go back to where you have the FTEs? No, not this one, the previous one. The one you had on the longest time. Yeah, this one. So you have a year to date of 22.73. What year what's your calendar year?
That will be for the 24-25 fiscal year.
24-25.
So that's from here in 24. So that's currently right now the FTE rate that we are paying is 22.73 FTEs have been working from January to today's date.
Okay.
That's where that 22 is, and that can change. That's a fluid number based on the relocations and transfers ins.
So this is as that's October 2024?
Correct.
22.
Or August. It's for August, I believe.
It's from April 1 of this year through to the end of August, I think it is, yeah.
Okay, so that's about 6 months. So it's not, okay, so we still got some time. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Nope. I'm going to stick to the rule here, and I'll put you on for round 2.
Okay.
Councillor Kelly, you're next.
Thank you. I'm going to put you two on a spot. I have thought as a councillor that we actually expect to have 33 growing to 34 RCMP officers in town. It's obvious we're not. So, and I'm going to stop there for a second. Inspector, I really liked your report, and I truly appreciate your candid responses. I really do. But back to putting you on the spot. How many RCMP police officers do you feel we need working so that we have a complement that will leave Fort Saskatchewan the way you believe the citizens expect to see it? Because you're asking us to make that decision, and I'm struggling with it. So
it's a very dynamic number that it would be. I would, that 29, I believe, is a pretty accurate number if we had everyone there. Now, again, the 22.73, going through all those things, that's a reality of the industry that we are today, where that flexes. Like I said, I lost one member for 2 weeks because he ended up seeing something at a call for service that he needed to go and take care of himself for. That 29, if I could get to 29, I would be giving you both both reactive and proactive service. If we went anything above that, I would be giving you just more enhancement on the proactive side. So I'd like to see 29. 22.73, it sucks, right? And I, like I said, not for the good people that we have in terms of our members and employees. If we had not as good of a detachment workforce, I'd be more worried. But we are giving a service level to the Fort Saskatchewan. I would say above minimum, but certainly not what we could do with 29.
And I appreciate that response. Thank you. Mr. Fleming, please. We have a snow clearing reserve so that when we understand that the snow budget fluctuates year to year and we run surpluses and deficits through that reserve. Why do we not have an RCMP budget reserve so that we don't have to put Karina on the spot for purposely under budgeting, and council understands that we're going to budget for our complement? And we're going to expect that the RCMP provide our complement, not yourself, obviously, Inspector Rock, but that everybody's on the same page here.
To your worship, we could certainly do that. I mean, all city work areas experience variances throughout a given year. Any staffed areas have people coming and going, and sometimes it's more stable, and sometimes there'll be periods where there's more turnover or sick leaves and whatnot. So we do it for something like snow because it's unpredictable. The RCMP, it doesn't tend to be so unpredictable. Like it tends to hover around a certain number. I've just been messaging here with Mr. Edgington and just talking about ways we can be more clear. I thought we were pretty clear the last time around, last year in budget, when we talked about the working FTEs versus the requested FTEs. But clearly we need to work on that. If I was to be blunt, I would say it's almost a bit of a game you're playing with the RCMP. If 29 is the number, you're asking for 33. If we think 33 is the number, we should be asking them for 38 or 39. So there's a number that we're almost over asking them because we don't believe they can deliver on what it is we're going to ask for. And then the next question is, how do you budget in an environment like that? And we used to budget to the number we were asking for, and we were running huge surpluses out of the RCMP. Millions, over $1.5 million 1 year, I remember. It was covering, it was padding up the city's deficit. So we started to go down to okay, let's budget closer to actuals, and we've sort of moved closer to actuals year over year. So, but I do think we need to be more clear with council kind of what's going on when we're talking about 33 and 29 and what the budget is for sure. We could establish a reserve to deal with the variances, but again, I don't know if it varies that much year to year that we need to do that, but sometimes you just run the variance and you fix it the next year. It's close to the same thing, so.
And I appreciate your comments. I look at RCMP service sort of like snow clearing. You need it continuously, and we don't know what next year is going to bring, so we man up for it and we budget accordingly. So I'll leave it with you. You can sense a discomfort in council. At least I think I can. So it's not that. I mean, I understood the 29 versus 33. I didn't really realize that we were actually budgeting for 29 and only expecting 29. if I read this correctly, what are we paying for in the current year? 22.73?
So that's a partial number throughout the year. So that number is going to rise because we've had 2 people come back since then, and we'll be getting more of our hard vacancies filled here over the next couple months. So you're going to see that number, that 22.73, creep up to, I would suggest, probably 26 to 27 within the next 2 months.
But at current time, Inspector, we're paying for 22.73. At least the printing of the date of printing of this table.
At that point, it's the forecast, right, has been at the 29. Right now, we have 22.75. So if we reconcile the books on that day, we would probably be giving you back money in a surplus. But as that number rises throughout our fiscal year in the RCMP, then we're going to see a contraction between 22.73 and 29. And if someone invented a police cloning machine and we could go to 34, I would take you to 34.
Okay.
Go ahead. I have one more, but I can come back.
Okay. So, Mr. Fleming, you.
I just wanted to make the point clear, though, that we do pay for what we use, right? We pay for the actuals. So whatever we have at any given time is what we're paying for.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Abatoye because I told you I would go back to you when go ahead.
If you insist. Okay, so my question is about the federal versus the city. So the federal pays 10%, but do we ever have any situation where the city covers for the federal portion of the expense of the cost?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, no. We don't. We always pay the 90% is all that we pay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Not sure if I'm more or less confused here than when we started, but just going back to the FTEs and the actuals that the city pays out to the budget. So would it be correct in saying that the 22.73 is a rolling average for the year? Is that it is? Okay, so that's not just right now actual.
Yeah, so it's a rolling number that our salary forecasting tool generates at the point of when the report is asked for, and that number is going to roll. So like I said to Councillor Kelly, that you're going to see that number increase the next time that that report is asked for.
Okay,
so it's a live number.
So as of right now, then we're running a surplus, I guess, right? So and then what happens with that surplus that hasn't been paid out then because we haven't been able to operate at full or budgeted capacity?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, so it just surplus goes into our general surplus for the city at the end of the year.
Okay,
so we reconcile that in 2025, and then that will be part of the surplus.
Okay, then. Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I thought it might have been allocated within an RCMP reserve. I think that's what we were talking about earlier. For the budget presentation that you're going to be giving this year, is it possible, or have you already broken down the expenses within the 670,000 or whatever that number is exactly? Because I know some was allocated operations, new equipment, 8% increase. Can we just kind of see a breakdown of how that's used instead of just the cost per FTE? Because I think that might be beneficial for me at least. I'm getting some strange looks.
Your worship, through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, it was provided to you in your packet.
Okay.
So I can drill in it to a little bit more. There was the total of increases in pay, operation and maintenance, capital, indirect costs of dividend costs. So I've broken it down that way. Within that thicker multi-year financial plan document at the end of it gives you line by line the details of the RCMP budget. So it is detailed in there as well. But if you would like something further, I can provide that.
Okay, I'll review that and maybe let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, when you say established positions of 33, is that 33 people that you have hired? Like, how many people do we have hired? Not necessarily that are coming in every day, but how many right now do we have hired?
So out of those 33 positions, I think counting on my board this morning, I have people identified in 30 of them.
Okay.
So there's still a couple hard vacancies that we're trying to get to fill. So I work with our staffing people to try and fill those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly on round 3.
Yes, thank you. Inspector, you referenced earlier the police to population ratio. When you calculate the ratios, do you calculate it using 33 that we're budgeting or hoping for, or the 22.73 rolling average that we actually have?
So I have a number here that says RM counts used to calculate the criminal code per member and the police to population do not include FIS, PDS, enhanced positions, or CTA. They are calculating that based on the, just give me 1 second, I'll get back to the document before. So they are using the 33. Coming out to a police to population ratio of 856.
And in actual fact, we're running probably over 1,000.
Probably in real numbers, yes.
Okay, thank you. How many officers would we have to tell Depot we want so that we could get 29? I know it seems a bit weird to ask.
No, not at all. So one of the things that's happening for the RCMP in the province of Alberta, because of a myriad of reasons, is that we're sending most of our cadets to less desirable postings, because the first posting is really and truly the only posting that we can control. Then it becomes the need of the RCMP, but also needs of the employee or the regular member. I have gone back to our staffing people and said, hey, listen, I've got a council that wants to fill all of our positions. And I get put into a queue, and that queue is filled with a bunch of other factors into it.
And we don't need to solve that equation today, but I think it's worthy of future discussion. Just one last comment, Mayor Katcher, and I am done. I did look at the capital equipment and the stuff you had listed there. I support each and every piece. I would think in some instances like the ballistic shields, I don't think 2 for an attachment this size is enough, quite frankly. And I don't know why you wouldn't have enough to complement out 5 or 6 individuals so they could do a job properly and show up in the commanding force. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I think one of the things is because it is a new piece of kit that is being spread out across the division. Once we get everyone filled, I think then you'll see kind of an alignment of the need versus what you're getting. And one of the great things to say about it is if I thought that we were in need of 6 ballistic shields, then I would go and ask for those. But the nature of the work that we do, I believe, again, and you'll hear this later when we meet, is we still live in a safe community, and I think we need to put our heads on our pillows at night knowing that we're still in a pretty safe place.
And I appreciate that. I, for one, do not believe in defund the police force, and I'll make that publicly clear. It's not going to happen on my watch. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to thank you for coming out to present in public today. You know how I feel about the RCMP and our officers. I very much value what you bring to our community. And anybody who has to go out and see what you have to see and do what you have to do should be acknowledged more. You have one of the toughest jobs there is. And I know when you're writing a ticket for somebody, they're always angry at you. We need to educate people that if you're doing something wrong, you're going to get a ticket. And if you're caught. And you know what? I thank you for your service, and I thank all of your officers for their service. I think the public needs to step up and stand behind you more. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just acknowledge the two members in the back. Rob Stark is one of our general duty members, and Pedro Rodriguez is head of our general investigation section.
Great, thank you. All right, it's 3:29. We'll take a 10-minute break. So be back at 3:40. So we will recess. Okay, it's 3:40, so we will return. And the next item is the city siren system. Quinn Gillard presenting.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Deputy Chief Quinn Gillard. With me today is Fire Chief Todd Martins, Director of Emergency Management. I'm here to talk to you today about the public warning system and just deliver a basic information report. Next, do I control this? Nope, there we are. Okay, so as many of you may be aware, the city's current siren system has been in place since 2011, originally installed in 1981. The system itself has undergone several upgrades, revisions since then, but at this point in time, we are at a point where we are coming near the end of its current service life for the system that's already installed. The city itself has changed, as you've heard about in other presentations today. We've gone from roughly 12,000 people back in 1981 to almost 30,000 today. As our last sentence, we're sitting around 29,857, if I recall. So, with this in mind, what you see on the graphic above you there, or before you, is three of the current City of Sirens listed in green. Okay, ABA, ABB, and ABC. Those are the three sirens we have right now. As of 12 o'clock today when I checked, only one of them was functional. Right? What we are looking at is saying we need to do something with these systems over time. Right? And that's the thing, is the current system currently no longer meets our operational needs. As the city grows, as the city changes, we are seeing a need for better communication services available to actually reach out people. The June event where we had a tornado forming over Bruderheim that cast a Alberta emergency alert for Fort Saskatchewan was probably the best system that we had in mind at that point in time that could actually communicate with everybody as a whole. The sirens themselves simply do not have the capacity to reach everybody within the municipality these days. So with this in mind, we have to understand that there's been no actual budget set aside for the upkeep and maintenance of these systems, other than what comes out of the fire budget itself, for what I understand is roughly $500,000, right? And to keep these systems up to date, maybe actually more than that in future thinkings, right? So this in mind, something that the city staff have been doing between communications and the directors of emergency management and the deputy directors of emergency management, we've all been taking training on the Alberta emergency alert systems to be able to actually issue those alerts themselves. As of today, there's currently only 3 of us, however, that are qualified to do that. So there are options that do exist, and there are discussions to be had upon maybe what we want to do in the future with these systems themselves. But the advancements in technology do give us some benefit for what's actually out there these days. As mentioned before, the Alberta Emergency Alert System allows us to reach out to roughly 90% of Albertans that are within a cell phone system area that have a cell phone or other compatible device, radio or television, and get a message to those people, both audio, visual, and in some cases, if people have got their phones set to vibrate, we can at least get their pockets and get their attention in that form and fashion. The sirens themselves do not reach that capacity, right? Talking with people as I go through about my day, I'll ask them, did you hear about the last siren systems test that we did during Emergency Preparedness Week? Most people tell me no, right? So some considerations that are actually out there is you'll see that one of the options that we may want to consider is complete removal of the system itself in favor of other systems. What we could also maintain the system. A few options that do exist is maintain it to minimal standards to be able to reach a basic proportion of the populace itself, and that would be the installation of not only 3 new siren heads on the existing siren posts we have, but also the installation of 1 more post and siren system over on the southern part of the municipality. There's also a complete removal of all the existing sirens and going to an upgraded system that has voice and other communication capabilities, but would mean more posts themselves. So an expansion of what we have. And this is something that the city has seen before, where we've gone from 3 tonal systems, which give us a blaring single tone, a warbling noise, and of course an alternating variation on that. And we've gone to a voice-activated system as well, too, where you can hear a clear message. But those clear messages get distorted over time and space, so you need more of those posts to deliver that clear message. So that's one of the other options that exist, full siren placement. One more option that exists out there is automated landlines. Roughly 45% of Albertans these days maintain a landline. If you're indoors able to answer that, that's one option that does exist. And of course, there's also electronic signboards. And as we see with the Dow Centennial Center, as we see with the NR Care system as well too, with the signboards that they've installed, these actually do reach a good audience where people can actually see the message and actually understand what the message is meant to be, right? And of course, we have another option there. There's a combination of any of the systems that we have in place. Any
Okay.
questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll ask some questions. Councillor Kelly, you're first.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm a little bit taken aback when you tell me only one of our sirens is currently operational. Any plans to make the other two operational soon?
How does this go again? Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, we have put on maintenance plans in the past, and we've had them serviced, but it's the age of the system. It's up, it's down. The software we have is aging as well too, and of course the batteries have to be replaced every year. They're subject to weather conditions and everything else, so it's an ongoing process.
I can make comments because this is Kyle, correct? Thank you. My personal comments. I think Fort Saskatchewan's a little bit unique because of where we live. We have one plant, for instance, on the edge of town, and I mean on the edge of town, that produces nothing but pure hydrogen sulfide, H2S. As you both are aware, I know, one breath of that, you don't smell a second one. I think we have to have an early warning system that is extremely robust. I really do. In your report, you referenced automated landlines. I truly find that flawed. I like the concept around the cell phone thing. It's not, I didn't see it in here, maybe I missed it. I think that makes infinite sense, but I think along with that, there needs to be a siren system that is, and I stress, robust. I need to be able to hear it clearly and loudly in every corner of the city of Fort Saskatchewan. That would be my personal opinion, and if that is double the budget, it is double the budget. That's where I sit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I probably differ a little bit in opinion of Councillor Kelly. I think the same problem existed in 1989 when I moved here, as would exist with a brand new system. Nobody knows what the siren means, and nobody would know what to do if they heard it. We practiced those sirens all through elementary and high school. We always heard it. You knew when it was testing, but I would have no idea what to do if it was actually going off for real. So, and how do you educate everybody? I'm not sure. Our Fort Sask Alert system right now will alert you if you've registered for Fort Sask Alert, correct? Alberta Alerts is different.
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, that is correct. The Fort Sask Alert can work. However, to that note, as of the 2nd of April, shortly after the census was done, we actually did an inquiry as to how many people had signed up for the Fort Sask Alert. And as we found, there's only 3,500 people approximately that was signed up for that, as compared to, say, the 16,000 that are signed up for the waste management app that the city has. More people care about their garbage than they do about getting those alerts. And I'm going to say that tongue-in-cheek. The system itself is actually difficult to sort of navigate to sign up for it in the first place, and that may be a deterrent for some to actually doing that. The Alberta Emergency Alert System, it's mandatory. If we send out an emergency alert, you get that right away. The sirens themselves are actually hindered by a variety of different things to actually get that message. The understanding of what the message means, what the tone means, is one of those hindrances. But designs in building structure, content, what's in there, noise reduction strategies that exist within these structures themselves, the foliage that we have within the city itself, all help reduce the impact and the distance of that message of the siren can actually be heard. And the more of that structure we have kicking around will actually draw back the ability of that message to project outwards. Add in AirPods and other distractions that people have covering their heads, and it's difficult to fully pierce that understanding understanding of it and get the message through to that. So the impact of what is the primary, what is the secondary, what is the best way to reach out to people. That is something that so far what we've seen so far is through their cell phones. They have them with them all the time. And of course, that combined with radio and television broadcast, we can reach a broader audience. And if they can see the message that's written down, also have it read out to them, we're now dealing with people that may have visual or audio impairments as well too. And we can reach that, again, that bigger market.
So I would say that I think that the Alberta Emergency Alerts is probably, no matter what, it's our best bet because it goes to everyone regardless. They don't have to sign up. But our Fort Sask Alert is just a text out. It's not an app people can go to, correct? It's just a text.
It's a text that people receive, ma'am.
Okay.
And it's through the through your worship to Councillor Macon. It is a text, and it's something that they have to sign up for. It is not a mandatory process.
So would it make sense to change Fort Sask Alerts, well, kind of add a Fort Sask Alerts app with that? We know that, I mean, if you look at the Fort Sask Waste app, maybe you get more people wanting to download the app, and that can be something that people are used to looking at for alerts as well. Like, for example, if the bridge is closed because of an accident, that can go out on the app, and people can actually, in case they miss it or they don't see it or their phone is off or they're in a meeting, at least they can actually go and look at an alert app and just see different types of emergencies that are happening. And then if they're more used to looking at that for that information, then that helps us even in the state of an emergency where you're trying to get out information that you want specific and that you want them to see.
Through your worship to Councillor Macon. That's correct. It's the more awareness and education we have on that, the better those things can be used.
Thank you.
Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, maybe along the same lines as Councillor Macon. I struggle with spending the money to update this system because everyone is now on their phones, and as soon as one person gets flagged that something's going on, they're going to go out and look at it, or maybe make a call to law enforcement or the fire station, however that plays out, and then you know they're going to start posting about it on these pages, social media, and like that's a very prolific way of communicating or disseminating this type of critical information, and it's a timely manner of doing it with cell phones that everybody is carrying in their pocket right now. So I maybe just a couple questions then about the effectiveness of us following through with this type of system. Is what are the plans that are closest to Fort Saskatchewan doing right now to ensure that the community adjacent to them is going to be early warned if something happens on their sites already? So I know a few of them have sirens, but I don't know how far reaching they are or what other methodology they employ.
Your worship, through to Councillor Nguyen. So that is something that we're working with on an ongoing basis with all of our industry partners. A majority of them do have sirens. So, and there is a process in place on when their sirens are activated on who they notify through our emergency management plans, as well as through our bylaw on notifying our DEM online, which then triggers our emergency plans on what we do next, as far as whether it's the Everbridge system that Councillor Macon was speaking about, or it's the AE, the emergency alerts that we can push out as a municipality as well.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. And then lastly, actually, yeah, I think I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye.
Thank you for your presentation. No, I agree with the comments that have been made so far, the last couple comments about not renewing the existing system. And I think coming back to the conversation of the app, the waste app versus the Fort Sask Alerts, the reason we see the difference is about value. Like, people will log onto the app, on the waste app, because they know that they can get information about their bins, but until they see the value of what you're providing, they wouldn't sign up, right? So I don't know about an app. I don't know if people will actually sign up to the app, but I agree with the comments that have been made. But I have a few questions about the electronic signboards. Like, how's that going to work? Are you going to just display information when there's a problem, or is it going to be used as an educational tool?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoy, that's a great question. It could be used in a variety of different ways. It could be used singularly as an emergency warning device where it remains off until there's an actual emergency broadcast that has to go downrange. It could be used as an educational tool by the city to announce when there's a survey happening, or when there's a census that's occurring, or when there's other information that the city council wishes to pass downrange to the citizens of Fort Saskatchewan. There's a few different ways that tool could be used.
Okay. Just because I'm agreeing with your option 6, the combination, because I think coming to the comments about everyone has a cell phone. I know when I traveled to the US, for example, nobody asked for my permission. They just send me alerts, right? So I think in the case of an emergency, everybody should automatically get a text message, you know. And something else that I was surprised, and I don't know if it's effective, but I think it's effective because everybody's on social media. I was surprised to not see social media on your list, you know, because everyone is on social media. Everyone is there looking, you know. So is that a tool that we can also take advantage of, you know, as a city? And just back to your presentation, the example you had Toronto, something about going to a radio frequency to get information. So is that also something we can take advantage of using our local radio station?
So through your worship to Councillor Abatoy, so I guess for the first question there about the social media, whatever means that we actually receive the information about something happening in the community, whether it is through the on-call director of emergency management getting a call from the site saying that something's happening out there that alert us to notify the populace, whether it is an Alberta emergency alert that comes from the Alberta government initially to help us understand that something is happening. There's always going to be a time lag for when we get information to getting it out the door. And the faster we can get that information, the faster we can get an alert out. And so whether that alert is on a signboard or whether it is on a wireless emergency alert system such as Everbridge or, again, Alberta Emergency Alerts, the faster we get that, the faster we can get those out there. So it's the ends justifies the means. If we have to go through the streets banging on drums to get people's attention to tell them to shelter in place or leave, that's what we'll have to do, right? But it's always best to have a primary system and then a couple of backups if you can get it.
Okay, so
does that answer your question?
No, it does. I'm looking at the mayor because I think she might give me a smack on the wrist now. But what's your ultimate recommendation for the primary tool that we should use?
Your worship, through the council, Abatoy. So our recommendation would be the emergency alerts. Our industry partners do have the siren systems in place that notify, as well as the systems that are in place to notify us. A lot of confusion on our sirens and what they mean, and they get confused with the sites and industry on when we set them off and when they set them off, and what we do. When I first started about 3 years ago, we did do a study in Alberta, and we looked at all of the municipalities that have risk or similar risk to us. And there's only one other municipality in Alberta that actually has a siren warning system, and that's for flooding, not for the type of industry we have. And even our partners next door with Suncor across the street from Strathcona County, that municipality does not have a siren warning system either. So the Alberta Emergency Alert seems to be the most effective tool. It's in your vehicle, it's on the radio, all your cell phones, your TVs. That's the direction we're going with new AI technology. We also have options for ourselves in our plans that we do hit all those social media. So it is pushed out on our local radio stations. It hits our social media, hits our city pages. So that's already in place on the back end for if there should be an alert that comes in.
Well, I appreciate your responses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I can add into that, it's when we push out Alberta Emergency Alert, it is automatic to TV, radio, and cell phone broadcast. There's no choice in that. It overrides whatever else is being broadcast.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Blizzard.
I guess my first concern would be how long have these two sirens not been working? Because I thought they were tested regularly.
Your worship, through the Council Blizzard, we do test them on our annual maintenance, and then we test them once during Fire Prevention Week and once in the spring during Emergency Preparedness Week. However, the system is just that old, and the technology and when it was put in place, that's what we're struggling with. unless we'd be in there every hour checking the system. Right now, we're just really struggling with the technology on when it notifies us that the system's down or it's throwing a code. We do change out all the batteries through all the systems regularly, and then we have the company come in. The challenge is the company that installed it doesn't exist anymore. So we're having another fire alarm company work on it, and there's struggles with getting just the standard fuses for it, and a lot of stuff is ordered out of the States, which does take time when we do need it.
You don't need to defend it, but I swear they did test them more regularly years ago, but maybe not so much. So we've been really operating without it anyways, right? For the most part. I guess we got one working. So when you do the Alberta emergency alerts, is that like, can you specify Fort Saskatchewan residents? Is it local? Can you add in north end of, as Strathcona County gets built up? How does that work?
Your worship, through your worship to Councillor Blizzard. So that's like actually exactly how it works. We can log into the system and we can actually select the communities that we are trying to notify. So we can actually spread that message out depending on what that is and the impact it's going to have. And again, we may be acting as a first alert for other neighboring partners to actually notify their emergency management teams and spread that message out even further itself. So we have that capability, and it's something that we're trying to get more and more staff qualified to do.
Okay, and I guess my only concern here would be maybe the heavy industry that we have not that far away from our residential on the, I don't know what you call that, northwest corner or northeast corner of town. But this would work for that too. Cloud of chlorine is coming, take cover, go inside. I mean, to me, it seems like these sirens are kind of antiquated, old. Don't need them anymore.
Through your worship to Councilor, that's correct. We can reach out to those areas as well to notify.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the speaking order. And I think that's where I was going to go with my speaking. The Edmonton tornado went through in 1987, I believe it was. And back in 1987, there weren't warning systems, but then again, there weren't cell phones either. I know I started working for the city in 1990, and I remember the first cell phone that our engineer had, and he walked in and it was this big, but only a very few people actually had cell phones. So technology has advanced. We no longer have the rotary phones that I don't think they're even serviceable anymore either. But I think what you're telling us is it's old technology and we need to move into this century with it. As far as the electronic signs go, though, I probably wouldn't see an advantage with that because we have the Dow electronic sign right now. We have, is it NCIA or NRCare? They have 3 signs that are out. And of course, I've never seen them operational coming into town from any place. So, you have to be in a specific place. But I tell you, when you're sitting in a room of 1,000 people at AM, an alarm goes off, every phone goes off in the room. I've also heard the fact, I can't remember what our last one was when we had an alert that happened, but I remember because somebody from where my mother was in Spirit River saw the alert or heard the alert and actually phoned her friend who didn't have a cell phone and let them know. So, I mean, I think the process that we're using is good right now, and that's why I've been questioning why we continue to have these siren systems, and they are confusing. So I guess my last comment is I know Sherritt does one every day at 12 noon, and if you're outside, somebody will say, "What is that siren?" Because they don't know whether it's the city or Sherritt. And I had to ask that question myself. It was like, is there something I should know? So I think if we get our technology into this state, then I think we'll be more effective. But I think giving a false sense of security that these sirens are doing something, I think, it's not good for our community either. So I agree with your recommendation. I think it's a good one. Okay, Councillor Harris.
Public safety is the foremost important thing that the seven of us have to be concerned about, and as you and the inspector from the RCMP. That's why we're here. And I have to say categorically, the sirens do not add anything to promoting public safety. It might be a feel-good for some people, but nobody knows about it. There are other techniques and other tools, and ultimately your responsibility is to ensure that we get the advice that we need to do that. And I'm at the point where those sirens should come down. They're an operational cost that adds no overall value to public safety. I can't remember the last time I heard those sirens go off. And they certainly didn't do anything, and if anything, it confuses people. So the sooner we can get rid of them, and whatever we need to do that, I would fully support it. And find the other things that ultimately do promote public safety in our community, because we are unique. I grew up in Lethbridge, and I remember Lethbridge, and maybe up here, but when I was in junior high school, they put in air raid sirens. We had 6 air raid sirens in Lethbridge, and they tested them a few times, but people would always say, well, what are those for? Well, that's in case the Russians decide to nuke us or whatever. And so, those reach the end of their life, and then people realize we do not need air raid sirens in Lethbridge. So this is about at the same context right now. So I would support getting rid of them sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to round 2. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I guess when I look at this, excuse me, I know you titled this public warning system. I visualize emergency warning system. I'm not looking for a warning system that says it's going to snow 2 feet tonight, be careful. I'm going to share a real life example of mine. Now this is from decades ago, but it actually happened. I was alone on our little golf course on hole 3 along the highway and across the highway from the Chev dealership that is still there. Different owners at that time. There's a yellow haze that rolled in from the east. I could see it coming. And halfway down the hole it hit me. And some plant out there leaked a gigantic amount of ammonia, and I had to quit my golf game and go home. The next morning, the Chev dealership that was painted white was all yellow because of the ammonia leak. That's how strong it was. Now, had it been an east wind and that hydrogen's H2S plant been leaking, I would have been dead. So I understand the concerns around the sirens, but the emergency alert for cell phones makes infinite sense. Most of the population obviously has a cell phone, but that doesn't mean that everybody has a cell phone at all times. When I'm on the golf course, I turn it off and I stuff it in my golf bag. If I'm a kid at the bike skills park, I don't have my cell phone in my hip pocket listening for it. Or any one of a number of things. Furthermore, there are a certain percentage of the population that don't have cell phones. Scratch social media. This is an emergency alert system, not a public warning system in my mind. First and foremost, an emergency system. So I'd like to suggest that you give council, please, a budget estimate for a proper siren system, because I think if we all agree, the existing one doesn't work. Now, there's a series of ways a flat siren could work. My grandmother, when I was a little kid, had 32 people on her country landline, and it was one constant ring with a series of different shorts and longs to make so everybody knew 30 different combinations of that. But I like the idea of the voice-activated system. It doesn't have to be as overpoweringly large. But if I'm out and about on the street riding my bike or whatever and I don't have my phone, I know something's going on. And I would expect that to be used when there's an emergency. Not to notify everybody that it's July 1st, obviously, but for an emergency so that people don't become, what's the word I'm searching for here, deadened to the effect of the thing. So I'd like to see a budget on both. I think 2 systems are useful, and again, I've worked in some of those plants out there. I get it. I want the plans here, but we need to be prepared for the worst case scenario, not the social media scenario the way I see it, gentlemen. Thank you.
Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, just a couple last talking points. You mentioned that there was one other community in Alberta that employs a siren mooring system like this. And are they similar size for Saskatchewan, a lot smaller? How effective is it? Has it been effective in an emergency situation? Or do we know a little bit of, I guess, information or feedback from that community?
Your Worship, to Councillor Nguyen. So it's High River, and they use it specifically for their flooding. They've spent quite a bit of money on upgrading their system on the last flood that they had, as well as supplies, equipment for emergency management through the public education piece. So they're the only ones, and it's specifically used for flooding.
Okay, and would you say, just I don't know, from a perspective down here, that their population is well aware of the system, what it means, and how to take action when the sirens go off?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Nguyen, I believe yes. I think we have a very safe community, safe-minded community with the number of industry partners we have around us, as well as our residents that work in industry. Again, it's very safety oriented. I think for the most part, the community is aware what to do in these types of emergency. Again, and then using the tools that we have currently in place just enhances that.
Okay. Last thought I had, if there's 19 people on the Waste app, why don't we add an alert system to that app?
Your Worship, no, through the Councillor Nguyen, it is something we are looking at, and just if they've signed up for the Waste app, can we actually just automatically sign them up? And it's something we just have to talk with legal about.
Oh, so that's,
we can do that.
Potentially. I mean, it's wide reaching as it is. Yeah. Right. Okay. Interesting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just finish up here. So my questions to Mr. Fleming. So with regards to the question on costs, that's in our report, isn't it? And then what's next steps?
To your worship, I do believe there was costing for a mass warning system on page 3 of the report. I'm just checking. Yeah, it's in here for 550,000 or 539,000. I think next steps for now, just let us take this feedback away, and we'll follow up with council on what we're planning to do. And if anyone on council, if there's not agreement on that, we can always look at doing notice of motion for further follow-up discussion. But from what I heard today from the bench anyway, just based on the informal feedback, is that there seems to be support for our suggestion not to continue forward with the sirens. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. All right, and we will move on to the next one, which is asset management plan. So welcome, Stuart Gerber.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Stuart Gerber, and I'm your asset management advisor. I'm here for the annual update for the asset management program. Thank you. It's been a busy year this year. We've got several departments working on the application at this point. We've got a few more queuing up to go on to the system. With parks and utilities, we started out with vehicle inspections as a starting point and continue to roll out from there. We're still continuing our maintenance tasks for both data and fine-tuning the system as they roll out new components or as we learn about the new components in the system as well. We're also at the point where we're looking at loading asset conditions, which is a significant milestone within the program, because everything up to this point within the system has been based upon the estimated TCA lifespan of the assets, where now we can actually start looking at the asset conditions and move forward and make better informed decisions based upon the asset conditions. This diagram before you is actually for a single road segment from the town of Drayton Valley. They use the same application as us. They started implementing, I believe, 2019. The three middle dots are actually maintenance tests they've done on the road to maintain it, and it was all crack sealing. But with every time they've applied a maintenance task, it's improved the quality and extended the life of the asset. This is what we're working towards with all our TCA assets, to get those quality asset conditions in to make better informed decisions and to better forecast the life of our assets. As part of this as well, the utilities group, with assistance from their new utilities coordinator, they're going to be going through historic videos of the sanitary pipelines and storm pipelines to actually give us that quality for the utilities infrastructure. Implementation to date, utilities, like I said, we started out with the vehicle inspections. We've also rolled it out to the building inspections for the lift stations, as well as the water reservoirs. They're also using it for their weekly water sampling locations, so we're tracking them more thoroughly, as well as the enzyme treatments. Utilities is unique at this point because we're actually taking the service trackers that are coming in, we're creating work orders, giving it to the foreman responsible for the utilities group, and he's distributing the work to his staff there. Parks, we started with the monthly playground inspections. We started doing special events during the summer to assign work tasks, and we're just rolling out to the tree pruning maintenance program as of last week. The public works clerks, I'm working with as much as I can to keep them informed of changes that are coming up. They're a unique group within the city. They share responsibilities, and I've been trying to manage the workflow so it's actually a benefit to them as they go forward. With finance and the TCA records, we're just waiting for approval from finance on the 2023 inventory numbers, and we've got partial records right now for the 2024 assets to go into the system. The goal there is to actually manage all TCA records from the new asset management information system. Departments preparing data for engineering, it's more upcoming training so they can actually do some planning for future projects and review asset conditions and what's the priorities going ahead. IT, we're looking at bringing the computer inventory online for them to better manage and have a central system for that. Fleet, we're looking at bringing in the maintenance schedules of all the vehicles. I just acquired them, a couple of weeks ago, so we got to see how we can implement those into the system. Roads, we're still doing some data cleanup and acquiring a little bit more data to move forward with them. The asset management information applications consist of Asset Manager, which is the central repository for all the assets. We have all 16,000 TCA assets in the system, and secondary supportive roles, we have up to another 75,000 assets in the system. The maintenance manager is more the work order system for the operation. Also for the asset manager, it tracks all the financials, life cycles, and allows a bit of planning and forecasting as well around the assets, either individually or as an asset group. The field application under Asset Manager is utilized on personal cell phones or iPads. These allow them to do service requests, work orders, vehicle inspections. There is a route tracking capability within the application. So for parks, when they do their winter snow clearing, they can have a background map of Zone 1 and their priorities for that snow clearing. Same thing can be set up for the roads department, especially if it's a new employee, checking where they have to go. It's a great benefit to them in the field. I've tested it without having the cell phone data on, and it's still picking up GPS coordinates. It's not real-time tracking of the GPS, but the route can actually be saved to the system for future review if required. There's also the customer service request portal. This is what we're moving towards to replace the Fort report. Timeline on this is hopefully February, March timeframe, but there's significant benefits with incorporating it within the system. Better integration with the asset management tools, because we can actually go from a service request to a work order with a single click. Reduces the workload there. Within the utilities group right now, they're actually taking the service request, copying it into a work order, closing the service request, and all future tracking is going on in that work order. Not to say everything's going to become a work order, but at this time, for a smaller group, it's the easiest way to manage. There's more reporting capabilities, and we're also on an older version of Fort Report, so it's timely to move forward. Changes to expect. I'm trying to keep it relatively simple for the general public, trying to minimize the changes on that side. If you're familiar with using the Fort report on a web page, you right now see the department on one side, the category on the other. What will happen in the new one is you'll select the department, then a new dropout will appear for the categories. So trying to minimize the change there. Internally, they can have scripted dialogue set up. So depending on the occurrence or situation, they can have a dialogue to collect the information for the operations team to move forward with. We can take multiple service requests, put it into a single work order, like potholes. 10 people call in about the same pothole, but then there's only one work order tracked. With Fort Report right now, we're getting 10 pothole complaints. The ability to generate work orders from a single service request. We started this with parks this summer. Any events coming out of culture and recreation where it's multiple departments, they split out the parks department, put them in a work order for them, attach the documents and information they needed, and the system auto generates reminders. So in this case, when they got a new work order, they got a notification, they got the new work order. The current date was entered as the initial date. The target date was the date of the event. We also set up reminder notifications 24 hours before so that they would get a reminder that they have something to complete for the next day. And plan is to move all this into the service request tool so it actually deploys to the departments. Internally, I can set it up so an employee in culture and recreation can actually select multiple departments at one time and send it out automatically. So no intervention by the clerks in public works, but they're still getting the same information. They're getting the email reminders that there's work coming in. The approach I'm taking for replacing Fort Report, I've done an extensive review of Fort Report. Who's using it, how many numbers we're getting on different Fort Reports, and we're starting to prepare training documentation. When I say we, it's actually my new asset management technician that started in July. She's been a huge benefit to the team at this point and is really promising for the future and has enabled us to move forward a lot faster in the last 3 months. We're also prepping the historic service trackers, so everything that went through the pilot in 2017 and has been live since 2018 will be ported over to the new system so we're not losing the history. And we've pretty much got steps 1 and 2 done. Next step is to reach out to the business units involved. So I've probably got 15 business units in total that I'll be working with over the next few months and starting to configure it and train it the way they need it to work.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to go first on the question. So it's just a simple question. So as you move forward, are we going to have to educate everybody it's a name change, or is it just going to flip across and
Your Worship, it's just going to flip across. I've been working with communications and they've been testing it, and they can just insert it into the current page and it'll just roll across as Fort Report.
Okay, and then the other question that I have, does it have the ability to shoot out, because most of them are coming in on that way through like a email, does it have the ability to shoot out a response to the individuals so that they know it's being accepted and then when it's being dealt with?
Your Worship, we do have the capability of sending out an email. They'll also get the reference number to that ticket as well. Further communications I need to look more into because I could send one when the service request is closed, but my concern there is the work order of the departments at this time, because they may close it and create the work order. So the work hasn't been done, but the work order service request has been closed. So I need to see how we're going to be working with it before I set up any communications that way.
Okay, great. I'll appreciate hearing how that's going to work out. Councillor Macon, you okay? Councillor Blissard.
You asked my question too, but I'll just say thanks for all your information. But I think we're probably all more heard about the Fort Report. I'm glad the name is going to stay the same, because I was going to say, you know, they still say X, formerly known as Twitter, to this day, which has been a number of years. So I'd hate for this customer service request portal to become the standard, because I think Fort Report is, people are learning slowly but surely. It's a good service. Thank you for all you've done in the report.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Batoye.
Thank you for your presentation. It does sound like a really robust software with all the capabilities you just talked about. My question is really, it's all about data. You talked about some departments working on their data to get it on the software, and we all know that garbage in, garbage out. So how are we ensuring quality checks are done as those data are being imputed into the software?
Your Worship, the Councillor Batoye, that's something that we're still working on, because it really depends on the data source itself. Because we've got some where we're updating attributes, there's some where we're actually updating the GIS information. With the GIS side, we're going to keep the GIS data as the source, and we're reconfiguring in the background, so any changes we make today will be uploaded tomorrow, ready for work the next day. But it's more going through a bit of a review process will have to be set up depending on the type of data that we're working on.
Okay, so you're going to be reviewing it as you go, because I'm thinking more specifically with maybe equipment, for example, that's maybe somehow the data that's been imputed for it to be repaired or maintained is incorrect, and so we missed that timeline. You get what I mean? That's just an example. So, but like you said, there's gonna be reviews on the way, so that should be caught. My second question is, so what is your timeline with respect to being done with this? And I know it's a whole process. I do know because I've been in organizations that have done a whole software change. So, but what's your realistic timeline to be completed with this?
Your worship, the Councillor Abatoye, I was really pushing to have a lot of it done this year. But I'm finding that I'm having to stagger the groups so that I'm having them at different stages. So I'm dealing with utilities. I know they're at this point. I'm taking them to this point. Parks, I know I have them at this point. Once I get the Fort report update implemented, I can move them further ahead. Waste management, I can bring online when I actually get the new Fort report in, because with parks and waste management, they typically have the largest volume of service requests through the Fort report. So I'm trying to reduce workloads there where we're not just having to copy information over and create service requests or work orders. I want everything to come in as service requests, and then we can manage it with a one-click switch over if work's required, or it can be closed if it's just an inquiry about, oh, what's my garbage day? And it can be closed at that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Big job. How long have you been at it now? Just curious. 3 years?
Your worship, the Councillor Kelly, 2.5 years.
2.5, so.
It was March 2022.
And if I understood your response to Councillor Abatoye, if all goes well, by the end of next year, you'll at least have history into the system and now be in a go forward operational mode where just new stuff is added. Is that sort of the goal?
Your worship, the Councillor Kelly, yes. What I'm really striving for is to make this more a central repository for all the data. One thing that I'm really trying to push with the groups is some of the one-off work done to assets, like when utilities group gets called out after hours because an alarm went off at a lift station. We need to start recording that type of information and capture that, because we need that history for that site, because that's the type of stuff that usually gets lost or forgotten, especially when you have turnover in employees, and where your 3-time-a-week inspection of the lift stations being completed. That's great, but it's some of that one-off stuff that we need to start capturing more.
Maybe that leads into my next question. I think you've done a great job. I was going to ask you for an overall opinion. I think you've already shared that. Do you have any insight as to, or could you offer council any thoughts on, from your perspective, what could be better or what could make your job easier?
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, I think my struggle right now is just getting some of the data. That's where some of it is. I haven't mentioned facilities yet because I don't have the data for facilities. There was a review by our new insurance company of all our buildings this spring. I'm still waiting for that data to come in. So it's been a bit of a juggling act going in between the departments, but I think doing the change to Fort report will bring it forward a bit more too, where they can only do the service trackers and not necessarily the work orders yet, because I don't have the data for it.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Okay, that looks like all the questions. So thank you very much for the update, and we look forward to hearing when things transfer over and everything that you're doing. So
thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Okay, are there any Councillor inquiries to administration. Okay, if not, I will take a motion to go in camera. Councillor Macon. Oh, Mr. Kaiser. No. Okay. Yeah, does anybody have any objections to that? If not, I'll take it by consensus. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Macon.
I'll make the motion that we move in camera for reasons covered under FOIP.
All right, thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. We will go to the committee room.